Welcome back to the channel. Today, we are looking at Under the Island. And I'm just going to say it. It's rare to see a game signal exactly what it is so unapologetically. You boot it up, see the colourful pixel art and that classic top-down perspective, and you know exactly where you are. It's digging deep into that old school 2D Zelda formula. But what's actually wild is that this is the debut title from Slime King Games, the developer. And honestly, this is exactly what I've been craving. Nintendo's been a bit experimental recently, and I hate to admit it, but Echoes of Wisdom didn't quite click for me. And if you want an original 2D Link adventure, you have to go all the way back to 2013 for A Link Between Worlds. The Link's Awakening remake on Switch was great, but we've been there before. In order to succeed, these games need to deliver carefully designed puzzles with a tight set of tools and that moment of satisfaction when the gears finally click into place. And that's the space that this game lives in and leans into with a ton of confidence. But when you go digging under an island, you don't always find treasure. Sometimes you find trouble. So, is Under the Island a gem worth unearthing, or should it be left buried? Let's find out. Under the Island drops you into the shoes of Nia, a hockey stick wielding teenager who's moved to Seashell Island with her archaeologist parents. Pretty quickly, she discovers the island is actually in danger of sinking, and naturally, as you do, she takes it upon herself to prevent that disaster by hunting down ancient relics, solving puzzles, and generally saving the day, because that's what we'd all do, right? The setup is simple, but that simplicity works. This isn't trying to deliver a complex, emotionally heavy narrative. It's a light adventure story designed to support exploration and gameplay rather than dominate it. People may dislike to admit it, but the story is just a vehicle for the gameplay and adventure in these games. It gets you from dungeon to dungeon. It's a nice bonus if it's clean and cohesive, but in reality, it plays second fiddle. Yes, it can absolutely elevate a game. Just look at Link's Awakening. But then, you're getting into goated territory, so let's save that for another day. On your journey, you will meet some genuinely charming characters, littered with sprinkles of humour throughout, and it's capped off by a vibrant 90s kid aesthetic, with Nia wielding a hockey stick instead of a master sword. The game really deviates away from the high fantasy and feels much more closer to Monster World or Earthbound. It may not have the most emotional journey, but it's engaging enough to keep you invested without ever slowing the pace, and it drives you forward to what really makes this game shine. If you've ever played a traditional top-down Zelda-style adventure, you will feel instantly comfortable here. The exploration leads to dungeons, dungeons lead to puzzles, puzzles lead to new tools, and those tools open up new areas, and the cycle continues. And that loop remains satisfying throughout the game for one simple reason. The level design and mechanics are simple, logical, and deliberate. You're not crafting hundreds of solutions, you're working with a defined set of abilities and figuring out how to use them creatively. And it's that structure that makes each dungeon feel purposeful, and there is always a defined reason to push forward. The combat is exactly what you'd expect from a game of this nature. It's snappy, responsive, and can be really enjoyable. There's no shield, it's just you and a hockey stick. As such, it's more about positioning and working around enemy attack patterns. It's your typical glass cannon build in an RPG. It definitely feels less like a power fantasy and more like a scrappy kid trying not to get bruised. And it works brilliantly. Eventually, as the game progresses, you'll gain more and more tools, of which you can synergize with one another, resulting in some really unique and creative solutions. There are times when enemies may initially appear to be too strong or have too many health points, but that's intentional. The game is actively encouraging you to cheese these fights, creatively cutting corners to beat them, and it's really refreshing. And one really underappreciated aspect of this game that I enjoyed is that once you find a new tool, it's relevant for the rest of the game. It isn't just required to progress in one specific dungeon and never used again. I'm looking at you, Hookshot. There are many occasions they aren't just for progressing the story. You will find a tool and remember that time you thought you could use a shovel or a bomb or a fire plant, and it creates a sense of anticipation every time you get a new tool you are trying to remember where that could have been used previously. The dungeon design is arguably one of the strongest elements of the game. Each of the 6 areas feels distinct, deviating from the standard grass, fire, water tropes in favour of a vibrant, interconnected ecosystem. Instead of just changing the colour of the ground or the season, the game shifts your entire tactical approach. You might transition from the suburban charm of the koala village to the mechanical complexity of a sawmill, or find yourself navigating the temperature-sensitive puzzles of Igloo Heights. This variation ensures that Seashell Island never feels like a repetitive grind, as each region introduces specific environmental interactions, like the physics-heavy water puzzles in the wetlands that force you to rethink how to use your tools. It's a masterclass in layered world design, where the visual personality of a zone is always backed up by unique mechanical hooks that keep the 10-hour journey feeling fresh and surprising. As mentioned earlier, the mechanics evolve naturally, and the bosses generally act as a final test of whatever tool or idea you've just learned, and it sets you up for the rest of your journey. Most boss encounters subvert standard combat in favour of inventive, objective-based challenges that treat every major fight like a mechanical exam. You're introduced to specific mechanics throughout a dungeon, and the boss is the final test that demands you tie them all together. Instead of just dodging telegraphed attacks and chipping away at massive health bars, you're often tasked with performing a specific role within the environment, whether you're acting as a frantic stagehand in a chaotic theatre production, swatting away crazed fans and fixing lights, or competing in a high-pressure cooking tournament against the clock. The climax of each dungeon feels like a final test of your wits and mastery of the island's physics. It's a refreshing take on a storied and thoroughly explored genre that prioritises cleverness over raw reflexes. And visually, the bosses are fantastic. They strike a great balance between being intimidating and staying true to the game's expressive, vibrant aesthetic. With memorable silhouettes and punchy animations, they don't just feel like generic obstacles. They feel like a natural, slightly surreal part of Seashell Island's ecosystem. It's a classic formula for sure, but it's executed with clear affection for the genre. But where the game absolutely shines the brightest is in its puzzles. They deviate from the standard block-pushing tropes in favour of a dynamic, physics-based ecosystem that treats the island's wildlife as your primary set of tools. Instead of simply hunting down a key for a locked door, you're often tasked with manipulating the local fauna through a clever layering of mechanics. It's a genuinely fresh twist in how animals are incorporated into puzzles. Nia carries treats that can lure creatures into position, whether that's moving a turtle blocking your path or to create a bridge, getting a cow to stand on a pressure plate, or solving more elaborate environmental puzzles. It sounds quirky, I know, but mechanically, it works really well. It adds personality while also expanding puzzle variety beyond the usual switches and block pushing. You'll even find sections where you physically knock treats around with your hockey stick, almost like a pinball, which adds a playful physics element to certain puzzles. It keeps things feeling light-hearted, but still manages to offer a challenge, and it's brilliant, and dare I say it, a notch above most Zelda titles. On the spot, I'd probably have to go back to Oracle of Ages to when puzzles were this fun and intuitive. The game also includes a selection of minigames and optional activities. These range from cooking challenges to small skill-based trials, and they're generally enjoyable for the first time through. They don't always have massive replay appeal, but they add a flavour to the world and break up the dungeon pacing nicely. Those completionists out there will find some extra rewards tied to them, while others can simply enjoy them once and then move on. And importantly, none of this feels like filler. The overall experience stays focused, which is refreshing. But if you want to complete every task and challenge, you are looking at about 15 hours of gameplay. The main story took me 9 hours, and that was without any unnecessary padding. And on the note of difficulty, it's well balanced. It's accessible enough for a younger or less experienced player, but it's still engaging for genre veterans. The puzzles do ramp up gradually in complexity, but the game does a fantastic job at educating you on the type of creativity required, and after a few hours, you begin to approach them differently. The combat stays fair, and the overall curve feels thoughtfully tuned. I'm sure there'll be some people seeking out a more difficult experience, but on the whole, I'd say it's fit for everyone. The game's presentation is consistently strong, with an art direction that carries a ton of personality. The character animations are expressive and snappy, creating a cheerful aesthetic that feels warm without ever becoming saccharine. And all of this is backed by a soundtrack that understands its assignment. It's melodic and upbeat when the action kicks in, yet settles into something calming and atmospheric during your downtime. In all honesty, it never quite hits the highs of its peers with those iconic themes we all know and love, but it supports the mood effectively, especially when paired with the day-night cycle that adds a subtle but organic edge to the world. And it's that exact atmosphere that feeds directly into the exploration of Seashell Island, which hits a very specific nostalgic sweet spot. The world is designed around that classic sense of gradual mastery. You'll constantly spot curiosities or shortcuts you can't quite reach, encouraging you to keep a mental checklist of areas to revisit once your toolkit expands. It's a dense handcrafted space that prioritizes curiosity over caution. Even when things get dangerous, the world feels welcoming. Visually, the pixel art strikes a perfect balance between retro charm and modern clarity. The environments are colourful without being cluttered, and there are some genuinely beautiful level designs that allow you to see earlier areas from new perspectives. But with all of that in mind, I'll stop glazing it for 5 seconds. There are a few areas where it doesn't quite reach top tier status. The combat, while enjoyable, never truly excels beyond the basics, and the story, while charming, isn't especially memorable. Not the most important aspect for me, but I know people out there genuinely care for that, so it's worth mentioning. As I discussed earlier, in this genre, the story is always secondary. There are obviously a few exceptions where it takes over the game, Link's Awakening being the only one that springs to mind right now. But for all intensive purposes, it's more of a carefree, coming-of-age story, as opposed to an emotional classic. And besides some of the minigames lacking replay incentive, I'm struggling to find any real flaws. This really is a gem. You could argue it leans a little too heavily on nostalgia in classic design, maybe playing it a bit too safe. But let's be honest, that's exactly what we want. Small deviations. After all, there's a reason that these games have been a staple for 4 decades now. So, what are we talking price-wise? It's currently on the eShop for £17.99, but as we've seen with a lot of indie releases recently, there is currently a 15% discount running until March 3rd, bringing it down to £15.29. That's €19.99 down to $16.99, $19.99 down to $16.99 US, and in Canada is $23.49, reduced down to $19.96. And as of filming, I've just realised there's actually a demo available in North America, so definitely go and check that out if you still aren't sure. Unfortunately, that isn't available in Europe for some reason. As far as I can tell, there are no plans for a physical release, and this is a Switch 1 title with no Switch 2 update planned, but realistically, I can't think why it's needed. For 8 to 15 hours of fantastic gameplay, you really can't have any arguments. In a world where Mario Tennis Fever exists for $70, this really is a no-brainer for a pickup. And the big question, is it any good? I think that I've made my feelings pretty clear on how highly I rate this gem. At the end of the day, Under the Island succeeds because it doesn't just mimic the past, it understands the soul of it. It's a beautifully focused adventure that respects your time, encouraging creativity and rewarding curiosity with clever physics-based puzzles and world-class dungeon design. In fact, I'll go one step further. This is easily my favourite 2D adventure since the Oracle of Ages and Seasons era on the Game Boy Color. While A Link Between Worlds on the 3DS remains closely contesting that spot, Under the Island captures a specific kind of suburban magic and mechanical ingenuity that I haven't felt in decades. It doesn't need to reinvent the genre to be a masterpiece, it just needed to be this well crafted. If you've been waiting for a game that finally fills that traditional top-down void with something that feels both nostalgic and refreshingly new, this isn't just a recommendation, it's a must-play on the Switch. It's fun, charming, and consistently brilliant. And honestly, it blew my mind. Please do yourself a favour and play Under the Island. And that's just about it for today's video. If this trip to Seashell Island looked as good to you as it did to me, let me know. But I really do want to hear from you. What is your definitive favourite 2D Zelda? If I had to nail down my own top 3, it would be Oracle of Ages, The Minish Cap, and Link's Awakening. I know, it's a bit of a controversial list, but it's definitely a product of my age. I grew up with a Game Boy in my hands, and there's just a specific kind of magic in those smaller, denser worlds that I've never quite let go of. And that's probably why Under the Island resonated with me as much as it did. It captures that exact same handheld magic that made those titles so special back in the day. It's a rare treat to find a modern game that respects that legacy without being a complete clone, and I'll leave you with that. I appreciate you spending some of your day here with me. And with that said, thanks for watching, stay cozy, and yeah, I'll see you around.